Let's go back to the big satellite view. What are we talking about here?
Force.
It's never been worse than social media running around saying science. Somebody quote some research out there. Our next subject. Quote some research, and a bunch of people comment on afterwards, oh, finally some science. That's not science. That's research. Now let's go back to research, which by the way was not this, because there were no variables controlled, because they didn't identify. You know what you have to do to control variables? You have to know what the fuck they are. And if you don't know the exercise equation, you don't know the variables. Yes, I made up that exercise equation, but it's not fantasy in my head. It's 30 years of an attempt to say, what the fuck is an exercise? What is it really? I need to know, otherwise I can't manipulate these things. And if we're going to make exercise decisions, I have to know what we're trying to make decisions about. And, most importantly, what are the outcomes when I do manipulate these things? What happens when I up support or down support? Unbiased. By stupid words like function. Because it helps some things and hurts some things. And depending on the goal, that's a good thing or a bad thing. Or ineffective or less effective, I should say. Does that make sense? We're not done. I want to show you what this RTS thing is really about in my mind. I've never done it yet. I've never done it yet. I've gotten better at the part that matters in the gym, that matters to clients, that matters to decision making. We want to actually know what's going on in the body. And forces, this is where it has to go. Because every bit of research someone's throwing at you, you got to be able to look at and say, I question this. We should all question this. We should all question this. We should all question this. Now the big question is, does that beat up the results? What are the results? And how's the results different from a conclusion? Damien, talk. Stop fucking around with whatever you're doing over there.
How are the results different from the conclusion?
Yeah.
Well, their conclusion is based on the variables that they chose to use.
Nope. The results are based on the variables.
The conclusion is an extrapolation
Yes.
from the data.
Yes.
The results are just the facts, the data.
The conclusion is a biased interpretation of what the thing said based upon their lack of knowledge or perspective. And all of us have a lack of knowledge, boys and girls. Assumptions, biases of what they were trying to prove. You could read a conclusion, which most people do, and go, well, here's what they found. That is not what they found. Because if they don't understand what an exercise is, they don't know what they found. They think it's closed chain versus open chain. They think it's squats versus leg extensions. And it's not even that. It's a specific loading scenario versus another specific loading scenario. And they didn't identify all the variables of the resistance profile, so they don't even know what scenario they created. And they're looking for good or bad. And every conclusion should include one sentence. Further study required. It is not science. It is not valid research. Sorry, it may be valid research. It's not a valid conclusion if it doesn't say further research required. And that research cannot have the goal of reproducing the same outcome. It has to have the goal of A, reproducing the same exact thing to see if the same thing comes up, because that's reproducibility. Did we do the exact same variables and the exact same controls, by the way, we're on research now, and come up with the same thing? That validates, listen to me, that validates the former research, that it was done in a way that they could reproduce the outcome. The question is, was the research any good anyway? Because if they keep reproducing the same things, which they should to prove the other one is good or bad, you following me? If I do the exact same things and I get two different answers, something was screwed up. But also, if I do the exact same things, I'm leaving out all the things that they missed in variables. Because I'm yet again not controlling the variables. So what's the goal of the research? To see if this was well done with what they knew and didn't know? That validates the process of the research they did. It does not validate the outcome if you left 10 variables on the table both times. So every motherfucker out there on YouTube saying, oh, science, oh, research, if you can't say what I just said, and not because you're repeating me, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. And I gotta tell you, I'm not a researcher. I don't know shit. This is just, in my world, logic. You cannot build a house without this. That's where this shit comes from for me, is engineering. And I don't know shit about engineering. But I built a lot of shit and some of it falls down and you start to fix your mistakes and you start to realize there's principles here I probably learned in school. Although those motherfuckers can't swing a hammer. But they also have all their fingers and I've lost a little bit. So what is research? All this stuff, it's it's what we're using the process of science for. But the key here, the key to real research is variables. And here's a big kicker we haven't said yet.
What's a variable?
Variable is something that can influence the outcome. Good question. Did everybody know that?
And you also have an endpoint though. Like if I do
Huh.
this, this, this,
Wow.
this, and this, and here's what I think I'm gonna get, and so.
And there's something bigger than that with endpoint. When your research ends, it may be the next week that changed the outcome because time is a variable. And if the duration of this thing, well, we did this and there were no ACL tears during that 15 weeks. But if you're creating micro tears, what you're doing is assuming you won the chess match because your pawn didn't get taken on the first move. Yay, I didn't lose. Fuck you, you haven't done anything. You think it was a successful section, you're not even hard yet. But I didn't run away. That's what I normally do. Awesome, that's a psychological problem. Nobody's pregnant though. You know. I'm trying to put it in terms Amber understands. So variables. Let's talk about exercise. Try to bring it back home again, Tom. Okay, I will. What are the variables into saying that isolation doesn't transfer? Which, by the way, is the question: proving isolation doesn't transfer or seeing if it affects an outcome? The question is not, we're going to prove isolation doesn't transfer. You've already fucked the whole thing up. That's not a valid question. The question is, if I do this thing, can we notice a difference over here? Of any kind, repeatedly. You can't be looking for or against anything. You follow me? So what are variables? The board, we don't have enough boards in here. I've got 25 feet of marker boards and we're not enough. What are the variables in whether a leg extension transfers to, let's make it simple, walking? Not running, not jumping, not anything else. What are the variables? Actually, that's a good question. Leg extension transfers to walking versus leg extension transfers to jumping. Oh, that's a great question. I can't read what I wrote though. I write in hieroglyphics when I'm going fast. You just got to look at the first letter and the last one and figure out what's in between. And the length of the scribble in between tells you something. What are the variables in a leg extension transferring to walking? Because right now, they say all the research shows that it won't. Actually, did any of the research actually measure a leg extension done the way we would do it? Oh, the variables. The way the leg extension is done. The way the leg extension is built. What else? By the way, they don't know that there's any way to do this. You lift the weight and you sit on the machine. Boom!
Who's doing it?
What do you mean by who's doing it? Well, if it's valid research, it should apply to everybody. Wait a minute. Give me some valid things that could screw up an outcome of a leg extension helping walking. Huh?
State of the person, can they walk?
Can they already walk?
What does walking look like? What's the model that they perceive?
If they can't walk, can they stand? This is getting really bad, I'm sorry. So what did we just say? Somebody said who? And there's a whole bunch more shit we could put into this, including funny stuff like do they have legs? But let's not go there. We'll save that for happy hour. Can they already walk? Because now you're looking for, does their walking change, as opposed to they can't walk at all. The next question, they can't walk but they can stand. What does standing prove that they can do? Well, nothing yet. But can they go from sit to stand, or did I help them stand? Because once you're standing, anybody can stand for a little bit, unless you got, ironically, if you have no muscles, you can't stand at all. No matter how balanced the forces are through your joints. So, can they stand, and can they sit to stand? Because that takes more strength than just standing. That's a squat. Ooh, that's interesting. That's a squat. So let me ask you a question. If I take somebody who can already jump, are you thinking their quads work pretty well? Well, I know they can stand, and I know they can walk, and I know they can create more force than their body weight because they can accelerate it enough to have inertia allow them to leave the ground. Jumping is not from your legs. It's your legs overcoming inertia with an acceleration that your inertial effects are going upward. You follow me? Yeah. They have a lot of quad shit going on, among other things. So what are the chances that I take a Michael Jordan who can hang up there for 7.5 minutes while doing Hanes underwear commercials? And what was that Bugs Bunny movie he was in?
Space Jam.
That was his. That was screw the triple winning the thingy and all the. That was really Space Jam was his ultimate accomplishment. Do you think that at that state of quadricep contractile ability, that doing a leg extension is going to change the way they jump? Absolutely fucking not. What if you just yesterday got to where you could jump at maybe an inch for the first time? Could improved quadricep contractile ability potentially influence that? Yes. So this guy's a question of what state of jumping. But now there's a clue. If this person can't walk, because one of the possible reasons is they don't have enough quad oomph, can the leg extension transfer? Absolutely, it's the only thing you can do, because you can't have them walk and you can't have them stand, and the harder part of standing is getting out of the fucking bed by themselves. Now, if you do enough quad stuff to get to where, which by the way, they're laying in bed and resisting you. And by the way, I did this for years. So when they say this, the big question is who? How deconditioned or how trained? Always the question. These people may... I'm going to get lost on that. The hardest part of standing is the squat from the chair or the bed. So A, if you were going to use their quadriceps to progress them to that, would you start at the top or would you start at the chair? I don't think you'd start working on your 500-pound squat at the bottom, because that's the heavier part. It's not heavier, Tom. You said it's 500 pounds. The resistance is torque. Hello, McFly, times moment arm. And where's that the biggest? Can it transfer who to do what? Why do we go through all that? Here's other things we have to consider these stupid ass things. We have to.